It is 1 o'clock, and welcome to the People First Leadership Weekly webinar. Thank you for joining me today. I know a lot of you are catching this on the replay, so if you want to jump in, also, if you do not want to be seen visually on screen, just keep yourself blocked or muted so that way when this goes on YouTube, people don't see you because there are some people who don't want to be on YouTube. But thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it. Today, we're going to talk about the power of the pause, leading with emotional control in high stress environments. So when we're talking about leading with emotional control in high stress environments, I see somebody just jumped on. Thanks for joining me. We have to take an emotional check of ourselves. And so we're going to talk about 3 key points and then some sub points under that. The first one is how reactive leaders create chaotic teams. We're going to talk around that a little bit. Point number 2 is just some simple tools to develop self-regulation and keep your composure. And then point number 3, the art of the leadership pause before critical decisions. And all of these are going to sound like common sense, but as leaders, sometimes in I'll call it the heat of battle, we don't always make the best decisions because sometimes our decisions are emotion based, and that's where we can get ourselves tripped up. We don't want to make emotional decisions. We want to make rational, objective responses, and the difference between reacting and responding. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. So let's dive into point number 1, how reactive leaders create chaotic environments. I want you to just think about your own work experience that you've been in throughout your entire life. You have probably worked for some leaders who have been very calm, cool, and collected, and always seem to have their stuff together. And then you have probably worked for some leaders who are emotional, erratic, sometimes making decisions based on emotion, and they were hard to judge because it was like, man, how are they going to respond? They're so irregular and inconsistent with their responses. I don't know if I'm going to get, Jekyll or Hyde today. And I want you to think about that. And then I want you to compare that to your own leadership, whether this be in your business, your organization, or within your family. Because a lot of leadership has crossover into family scenarios as well. And I always say that if you're a good leader at home, you're likely going to be a good leader in your business or in your organization, and vice versa, because I've seen that both ways. And I know for just myself, I was way back early on in my career, I was a classroom teacher and I taught 6th grade. A lot of the things that I learned about myself as a teacher, I carried over into my parenting when I became a parent, because I was a teacher first and then I became a parent. And so when I had my little blue-eyed daughter, who was born, 18 years ago, good golly, parenting was really a small step for me. I wasn't nervous about it. There wasn't a big change because I was used to taking care of a classroom full of kids and keeping things organized and that. So there's a lot of crossover there. So if you relate to some of this stuff in a family situation as opposed to a leadership position, it's really kind of the same thing. So your emotions as the leader are going to become the team's emotional climate. So if you are hyped up and you're upset and you're really emotional about something, you are going to be the thermostat for your team. The rest of them are going to respond to your emotions. And if you're like, well, I understand that this is kind of an interesting situation, but let's take a step back. Let's calm down. Let's just think about this rationally and objectively. And you use those words, you say those sentences, your team is going to respond to your leadership in kind. And they're going to be like, okay, yep, let's take a breath. Let's step back. Let's think about this. Okay, yeah, all right, Todd. Yep, not a bad idea. Yep, let's respond in this way. Fantastic. But if you're a leader who is emotional and you're mad and you're like, I can't believe they said that. I can't believe they did this. We're going to get them back and da-da-da. You're going to start to amplify that within the members of your team as well. And that's not good. I often talk about a scale of 1 to 10 on an emotional scale. And I like to be at a 5, because a 5, I can come down and be chill and be calm. Or if I need to ramp up a little bit, I can do that as well. But that gives me latitude and leeway on both sides. Now, I'm an extroverted person. I like to have fun. So I can ramp up to a 7 or 8 pretty easy and be excited. If I'm upset, the same thing is I have to keep in check, because if I get upset about something, I can feel myself wanting to ramp up to a 7 or 8 as well. So I need to keep my emotions in check. So what I like to do is mentally, I like to stay at a 5 all the time. And if I know I'm going into a situation that's going to be high stress, high pressure, I will have a conversation with myself before going in there and saying, okay, Todd, stay at a 5. Be calm, cool, and collected. They're going to throw some jabs at you. They're going to take some shots at you. They're going to try to trigger you. Just handle yourself like a professional. And I have done that. And man, I've gotten some great results from that. Just having that conversation with myself. The sub point from that is reacting instead of responding escalates issues. So there's two words that sound very similar: reacting versus responding. If you react, that's an emotional response because somebody says something to you. Now you're mad, you're ticked off, and you're going to react and say something back in kind. That's going to escalate the problem. If somebody says something to you that is taking a shot at you, they're calling you a name or whatever it is in meetings, because all this, I've experienced all of this in professional settings. And I'm sure some of you have as well. But if I take a second, maybe literally, maybe it's just 5 seconds. And I've done this where somebody's kind of taken a shot at me, and I'll take a breath and I'll just kind of count to 5 and won't say a word. And I'll do it right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just that 5-second pause and held the person's gaze made that person feel a little bit uncomfortable about, oh, I probably just crossed a line, because they're not saying anything. Sometimes your silence can convey more than your speech. And sometimes that's what you need to do. Sometimes if somebody says something to you that is way out of line and they've crossed a boundary, they need to be reminded without words that that's inappropriate. And your silence and holding their gaze will convey to everybody in the room that a line has been crossed. And maybe you don't need to say anything about it. And maybe you don't need to say, oh, you crossed the line, or you're whatever. They'll get the message. Once you do that, think about how you want to respond. Give you an example. I was having, this was not in a business setting. This was just in a casual setting with somebody that I know. We decided to enter into talking about politics. And if you know anything about American politics, man, that is a hot button event. And we both knew that we were on opposite sides of the political spectrum, so to speak, on some specific issues. And so this person that I was conversing with started to just kind of say some things about some issues that they knew I was probably not going to like, to see how I was going to respond. And I could tell that they were emotionally starting to ramp themselves up. And so I listened respectfully, and I just said, okay, great. I said, can you give me some evidence about, where you got that information from, and how you know that that's factual and true information? And they started to sputter and stutter, and they couldn't figure, everybody knows that. Okay, well, if everybody knows that, like, what evidence do you have to support that claim? Well, just, because people talk about it. Well, I'm not worried about what people talk about. If we're having this conversation, and this is a serious conversation, I would like to have some facts and evidence to back up, what you're saying. And because if that's facts and evidence that I'm unaware of, I'd like to know. So if you could share that with me. Well, and then that person just kind of, and I said, here's what I want you to do. You're not giving me anything that is really showing me facts and evidence about your side of the issue. So why don't you find some, and then let's re-engage in the conversation? Because what you're telling me is what other people have said and their feelings and opinions. You're not giving me facts and evidence. Oh, well, okay. And so what that did was that kind of disarmed them. I didn't attack them. I didn't kick them while they were down, but I did press them for facts and evidence. I was responding, not reacting. I kept the emotional climate at a 5 instead of ramping up with them up to a 7, 8, or 9, or whatever they may have gone to. So reacting escalates issues. Responding usually de-escalates issues, and that's important. So what are some simple tools to develop the self-regulation and composure? Breathing. literally taking a breath and letting your brain work before your mouth does. And then just composing yourself, an internal check-in, like, okay, be honest with yourself. Like, wow, I'm ticked. I'm really ticked right now. I should probably not say anything until I kind of feel my blood pressure come back down. Okay. Yep. No, and Todd, what's your response? I don't have a response just yet. I need some more time to think about it, and then I'll have a response for you. That's a perfectly acceptable answer. Do not let anybody force you to give a response before you are ready, especially in an emotionally charged situation. And maybe you're thinking about your spouse right now, because that's a real thing too. That's real life. That's where leadership comes in. If somebody is pressing, no, you need to answer me right now. Okay, I will give you an answer when I have a good response. And I don't have a good response yet, but let me think about it and I'll give you one. Man, that shows that you are calm, cool, and collected. You are going to respond and not react. That can be a really, really powerful tool in your toolbox by not saying anything or saying you're not going to say anything for another couple minutes. I'll get back to you on that. I have a response, but I'm not ready to give it yet. Maybe that conveys a message to the person that you're talking to about, whoa, maybe I crossed the line here. Okay, but he's being cool about it. Okay, I'll wait for sure. Another thing is scripts. I love scripts. I was one of the groups that I am currently coaching with. One of the members of the group came to me and said, hey, Todd, I'm going to have a one-on-one meeting with one of my direct reports. I've got to give them some negative feedback about their performance, and I'm not sure how they're going to take it. What do I do? And I said, plan out your response. What are the things that you need to say? Bullet points 1, 2, and 3. Fantastic. How can you say that in a respectful way that also shows that they need to be addressed? Well, and so we worked on this script together. And then when we were done, we had 3 well-articulated bullet points that talked about their performance in kind, respectful ways, but also held the direct report to a standard that was well established and was not personal. So I said, all right, here's your canned responses right here. Just read the script, go through your bullet points. You don't have to wing anything or let anything fly from the hip. Go through your canned responses and your bullet points. So this person went to the meeting the next day. They got back to me and they said, Todd, this meeting was amazing. I presented them in a calm, cool, and collected way. They responded well because I was citing the standard and not my opinion. And they could see that I was just kind of drawing their attention to the standard. It wasn't personal. I went through my responses. They were kind, they were respectful, and they felt that the meeting was good. By the time the meeting was done, they were like, they were apologizing for their poor performance and talking about how they were going to improve and the things that they were going to do to get to these levels of improvement. And I was like, fantastic. And so this person, this was months ago now, excuse me. And this person has continued to use scripted meetings with their one-on-one direct report meetings. And I was like, that's fantastic. Now you have a new tool in your toolbox that you can use that makes you a more effective leader. And when you are a more effective leader, your direct reports are going to see you as a better leader. They're going to respect you more. This is just these are bricks that are just building a better structure around your leadership and your relationship with your direct reports. So do not let stress triggers get you. And that's hard because we all have things, there are certain things that you can say to me that are just going to bounce off my back and it doesn't even matter to me. Then there's going to be other things that you say to me that, man, that's going to make me really, really mad. My job is to not let you see the difference. Super hard for us to do. Easy for me to sit here and say when everything's going well, but in the moment, in battle, in the heat of the moment, that's when we have to remember these things. And this is when we take that professional pause. Okay, I'm going to just take, and maybe you're the person that gets mad really fast. You get triggered really easily and your emotions get the best of you. Maybe if the only thing you learn from me today is to take a pause and let your blood pressure come down before you say anything, that is a win. Now, can you take it a step further? And maybe this is a growth point for you. Okay, This month, I'm just not going to say anything for 5 minutes. Then I'm going to respond. Okay. Next month, I'm going to shorten that to 2 minutes. And then I'm going to start thinking proactively while I'm taking my breath and having my moment. And then I'm going to respond. Whatever it is that you need to do that, but get better and better at it. I was talking to a group today. I had a coaching call with a group today. And I said, our minds are like toolboxes. So I want you to think about like your grandfather's toolbox, you know, those old red toolboxes, the metal ones with the lid that flipped open, and then there's a screwdriver and a wrench and a file and all that stuff. When we start on our leadership journey, wherever that is, and some of us are sitting here with empty toolboxes, you know, at the beginning of our leadership journey, we're going to put in a screwdriver. And maybe today that professional pause is the first tool you put in your toolbox. Maybe you've been on a leadership journey for a decade and your toolbox is full, but your chisels are dull. Okay, let's sharpen your chisels so you get a little bit better at that specific skill. Let's move on to point number 3, the art of the leadership pause before critical decisions. And we've already talked about this a couple different times. A short pause can change the outcome of a conversation. I know this has been the key for my marriage because yeah, sometimes I am the extrovert. My emotions are always high. I feel things deeply, both good and bad. And sometimes I have said things to my wife before I engaged my brain that I probably shouldn't have said. So this is probably where I learned this skill, probably the earliest in my leadership journey. Todd, don't say that. Little voice in my head. Todd, don't say that. That's gonna be bad, Todd, if you say that. All right. Let me just listen to myself here for a second. But slowing down, putting a professional pause before you make a sentence. Now, maybe you're in a leadership position or you're talking to another leader, and we talked about this a few minutes ago, where maybe somebody crosses the line with what they've said to you. Your silence shows more strength than carelessly thrown words. Okay. If somebody says something off the handle to you and you just sit there and stare at them for 5 seconds, just like we just did, and don't say a word, that's going to convey volumes to them. Now, that may also put them on their heels a little bit. And maybe this is a situation where maybe you need to put somebody on their heels, because as leaders, we don't wield our leadership just because we have a title. Sometimes we need to be the enforcer. Sometimes we need to show the weight of our words. Sometimes we need to show the weight of our position to the people that we work with and around and for and over. And sometimes somebody is out of line and it's your job to put them back in line. Doing so in a calm, cool, and collected manner is the best way to do that. I always talk about, not always, but I've used the analogy of lions and lambs before. A lion doesn't need to tell anybody else it's a lion. Everybody knows it's a lion. It knows it's a lion, and it acts like a lion. It doesn't ask for permission to act like a lion. It just is a lion. But a lamb is, excuse me, a more timid animal. And a lamb will sometimes ask for permission to do certain things because it's scared or whatever. But a lion is always calm. Very rarely do you see a lion scared or afraid. It is almost always calm. So be a lion. Don't be a lamb. Lambs show fear. Lambs can be easily influenced. Lambs get lost. Lambs can be emotional. I don't know if that's actually true, but it makes sense. So be the lion. Everybody knows that you have strength in your leadership position. Everybody's expecting you to wield that with respect and well. There are also people who are expecting you to wield it. Let me give you a practical real-life example of what that looks like. Let's say you're working on a team, and I'm sure this has happened to some of you who are listening to this or watching this right now. You're working on a team, and there's one member of the team who is doing an absolutely horrible job. They are not pulling their weight. They are not doing the work, but yet they are still kind of reaping the benefits because they're on the team. Everybody else on the team no longer likes that person because they're pulling up their weight for them. And what they want to do is for the leader to come up and set that person straight. But if the leader doesn't do that, then that disenfranchises the rest of the team. Well, geez, if the leader's not going to do anything about this person who's slacking off, why am I working so hard? Why should I work hard? And that becomes a toxic trait within the team. And then finally, you get a whole team of people who don't care because leadership is not handling the person who wasn't doing what they were supposed to be doing. Now, let's take the flip side of that. The opposite side can also be true. You have a member of the team who is doing a horrible job and not pulling their weight, and leadership comes in and handles that. That sets the standard for the rest of the team. Oh, wow, there is a standard. Todd just came in and made sure that person was doing their job, and they were not doing their job, and so there's some consequences. Huh, yep, okay, I'm going to do my job. Yep, I'm going to do my job. Todd, thank you. Thank you for taking care of that person because, yeah, that was pulling down the whole rest of the team, okay? Sometimes you need to be that leader. You need to be the leader who comes in and is the lion. A lion, everybody perceives the lion as strong all the time, even when the lion isn't acting strong. And that's how your professional pause in emotional situations can convey that strength to other people. Now, maybe this is, sometimes I think about leadership things in terms of movies and movie scenes. And you think about the big boardroom, and you've got all the executives sitting around, and you've got two companies that are negotiating a merger together, and you've got two CEOs sitting on opposite sides of the boardroom table. And you've got one CEO who's gregarious, and he's kind of like the snake oil salesman, and he's saying all the right things. And then you've got the other CEO who's just sitting there staring. Eventually, the snake oil salesman is going to start talking and feeling uncomfortable because their strength is in their words, and they've said a lot of words, and they don't have anything else to say. Whereas the CEO who's just sitting there calmly staring is conveying something. Here's another part of this as leadership, and this is something you have to be very, very careful with. When you are wielding your authority and power in your silence, sometimes you are doing that because the other person doesn't know what you're thinking or saying, and that makes them uncomfortable. That puts them on their heels. That gives you a tactical advantage. Don't let that go on too long. Because if you let the other person run wild with the thoughts that they have, they may start making assumptions and decisions based on wrong information. So a professional pause is just that, a professional pause for you to gather your thoughts, to maybe convey some things like, yeah, you shouldn't have said that. That was inappropriate. That was disrespectful. That was unkind, and I didn't appreciate it. And maybe after your pause, you can say those things. Be like, well, I don't feel that was an appropriate comment to make. Nevertheless, we're going to move forward, and we're going to talk about what you bring to the table. Man, that's a weighty sentence as a leader to say. And everybody in the room is going to feel the tension of that uncomfortable moment. That's okay. As leaders, it's okay to let people feel the weight of your personality, but you have to remember that you wield that power for good and not evil. Did everybody catch that? For good, not evil? Yeah. So think about that as you move forward in your leadership journey. How can you use a professional pause to control your own emotions in high stress moments? I'd love to open up the chat, or if somebody wants to pop on and have a question, I'll give you a couple seconds to put something in the chat. Maybe you have a scenario or something you'd like to bring up, and we can talk about it here on the call. Or if not, I completely respect that, because I understand as leaders, sometimes we have sensitive situations that we can't have that going out to everybody. So if you have a comment or question, feel free to put it in the chat, or obviously you can unmute yourself and come on in. Give you a couple seconds. If not, that's totally fine. I completely respect that, because sometimes when we're talking about leadership, we are talking about sensitive things and things that we don't want to be out there. Because let's face it, leadership can be a lonely journey. You can be on an island sometimes. And that is part of the reason that I do these calls. I want you to feel that you are not alone. That's part of the reason I have a mastermind group that meets on Wednesdays. where we can talk about things together, leaders together, so we are not on these islands where we are just by ourselves. So with that said, thank you for joining me today. If you have any questions about my personalized coaching program or my mastermind that I run on Wednesday afternoons, feel free to reach out to me. You're going to get the replay email for this probably in a couple hours or so. I'm going to get that posted on YouTube. And thank you again for joining me and taking time to join me at the People First Leadership Weekly webinar. I hope to see you all next week. Have a fantastic weekend, everybody. I hope to hear from you soon. Have a great day.